Wait. Okay, my viewpoint character from Insurrection. Okay, my characters, I had Ladislav Skadornik, I had Magda Petrovna, Jason Lindrider, and Lee Han, and her group. Those were my viewpoint characters. Eric had, Steve had Ian Trevane, and Kevin Sanders. Oh, and Oscar Dieter was mine. Okay, now, out of that group, who do you think was my viewpoint character? I have had a lot of people say, well, it must have been Ladislav Skadornik, you know, big, tall guy, you know, etc. Nope, I was Lee Han. The shortest woman that graduated from the academy and so forth. I thought I disguised my point of view character quite well. All right, I really have no idea what this panel is supposed to be about.
Come on. Szechuan Bratwurst.
By this time, I have been to enough panels, including some that I didn't know existed until 10 minutes before I arrived for it. I am assuming, since it's called Szechuan Bratwurst, that is going to be about how the Andermani came to the Andermani. And I happen to have right here you nine resident experts on the Andermani. Okay.
So many people here. Okay. And the first time I read
Closer.
The first time I read Honor Harrington and came to Honor on environment that Honor on enemies. So I don't
Honor among enemies.
Yes. First thing I thought, Russians in space. I never heard or read anything like that. And I saw two things. First, that even 2,000 years in the future, the Imperial Navy is still smaller than the Royal Navy. And I really like Mr. Rand's speech. We wouldn't be wicked because militarists if it didn't count what kind of ships went to our space. That's okay. So I really start looking for all things, Imperial German Navy, how it would look like, how it was organized. And someday we have to jump for the internet board about Honor Harrington. The guy who runs the show has another side about Star Trek. I never met him. I only know the updated the photo software. And Tom Pope showed up and was searching for people who know anything about the Navy. Wrote some in English, wanted to know people, I answered the email. I was, I think, the only one on the board who did that. It's the reason why I But at this time, I had so many pages of internet sources about that. I would simply, there you go. That is found on the internet site of the German Empire. Structure, several sites of the German. And so what do that? Right important is to understand is that the Andermani Empire in political sense is much closer to the Kingdom of Prussia and not the German Empire. The German Empire was basically a federal state, which of course two-thirds the whole population lived in one state, Russia. The Kaiser was not really powerful because the constitution says the president should be the king of Russia and should have the name German Kaiser, by the way, not Kaiser of Germany, not Emperor of Germany, he's not German Emperor. And the Kaiser would need, when you want to go to war, you need the majority Bundesrat, the chamber for the states, not the period, the states. And the Kaiser didn't have the word there, but the King of Prussia. So it is much closer to the King of Prussia. So even in the 1860s, when the King of Prussia has got a constitution, this constitution clearly says the King of Prussia could go to without consent of his parliament. So that is much closer to what we were reading in the HonorCon. The problem, of course, is that even at this time, there wasn't not much of a basically Frederick the Great didn't have a name. The King of Prussia didn't have a name for 150 years. Maybe some robots, but not all. So when you still have to look at then have to look at the Imperial Navy, or of course is only mostly something for the North Sea. It is, as somebody once said, it isn't, the high sea fleet isn't, because it didn't have enough range to operate on the Atlantic, but at least we have organization, we have rank insignia, the shoulder boards, etc. How many people do you have shipboard 2 of Astra? Sitzt die gehen von Ad Astra. Sag mal.
Tactical civilian.
Okay. The white uniform there is not modeled after uniform of the Navy, but after some after army is cuirassier kind of special branches, cavalry or something like that. The uniform, headgear looks like a beret, is or something more like something that is called a Katzin, but guys in the German army were wearing at this time. And of course, they had to model or start modeling how American
Basically, when I started building the Andermani in the Andermani Navy, Gustav Andermann was firmly convinced that he was Frederick the Great of Prussia. And any little niggling things that didn't fit the actual history, it was like, I was there, were you? when he got ready to reject them, which didn't keep him from being an extraordinarily competent naval officer and mercenary commander. So since he was Frederick the Great, he had to find a Prussia to rule. And he moved in on a planet full of ethnic Chinese who were about to starve to death, and showed them a way out, at which point they became very loyal, very convinced Prussians, and they didn't care if anyone else thought he was crazy. He was their lunatic. And so they basically, he's absolutely correct. They reestablished for all intents and purposes, what they were after was reestablishing the Prussian monarchy rather than the German Empire. And it just happened that Gustav was crazy and thought he was Frederick, but that it gave him a model that worked really well for what he then proceeded to establish. Now, if I ever get around to actually writing the books that I want to write about the creation of the Andermani Empire, you will find that he really didn't want to conquer those initial star systems that he conquered. The problem was they all assumed he wanted to conquer them. So they began like, well, we have to have a defensive alliance against him. We have to get rid of him. We have to, and he's like, Okay,
7 years.
look, guys, you know, I really didn't want to go to war with you, but I am a very accomplished admiral. I have a fleet, the one that you're concerned about, because it's so much bigger than the ones you've got. And I recognize that the way to nip this problem in the bud is to nip you in the bud. And that's precisely what he did. Now, when we got to the point of having to actually design the Navy, design the uniforms and so forth, it was not my area of expertise, okay? Nowhere near the extent to which we had a German-speaking expert available to do the work. And he and Tom Pope and the B9 guys, actually you were working with Tom before Tom was part of B9, I think, because you started working with him on SITS, before B9 actually formed. Tom is an interesting sort of, he's a quiet guy, you know, and everything else, and he is really, in a lot of ways, he's kind of the linchpin that moved from, that created B9. He started drawing people together when he was working with Ken Burnside on SITS, and then people who were interested and were fans got in touch with him, and the result has been a cross-pollinization that has led to the development of quite a few, how should I put this? B9 really has created very little that wasn't in the Honorverse to start with, but what they have done is an absolutely superlative job of taking niches that I had created but not yet fully populated and filling those niches in. And in the process, they've done a lot of really cool creative work. They've checked with me, they've said, does this work with where you were going with this? Is this how you visualized it? Ooh, okay, we can change that. And have given me a breadth of material and vision that is actually there when I look at it, instead of my having to stop and say, okay, I'm going to write about this now. I need to fill in details. Okay, a lot of the details have already been filled in for me. And the ability with Thomas Maroney and Tom and some of the others, they also have a much greater ability to create actual visual imagery for me, rather than when I've got locked up here and I'm describing through the interface of the art that I work with, which is words. They can give me actual technical drawings and uniforms, and I can say, no, that's not quite what I had in mind, and they go back and they tinker and they come back and they say, how's this? And I say, well, that looks really good, why is this over here? And Tom says, well, actually, when we were looking at it before, you had the wedge, and you come up with the ability to dump the waste heat into the wedge that you come up with later on. They have to have the radiators to get rid of the waste heat that builds up in the ship. And I'm like, ooh, that's really cool, you know. And then I get an ooh, shiny moment, and we go off in another direction entirely. It's just, it's really, really, the panel on collaborations that we did, was it only yesterday? That Eric and Tony and Chuck and I did. In a very real sense, B9 has been an active collaborator with me in the Honorverse for at least 3 years now. That they have gone beyond just we are going to archive information to we are going to help create information. We are going to give you input so that what you create is better than what you would have created on your own. One of the things that in the panel with designing the Navy just now, one of the things that Chris did was to help me visualize, not visualize, but conceptualize concretely elements of the Navy that had always been there in the back of my brain, but that I hadn't given an express structure to. And that was cool. One of the things that needs to be done is the creation of the German Constitution for the Andermani Empire, and we've been having a lot of fun with that. I gave them I gave Tom, who I think passed on to Marcus, this is how the Andermani state came into being. This is how it is organized at the for want of a better term, at the imperial level. This is how it's organized on the star system level. Here are the chambers, and here's who's in them, and so forth. And then Marcus goes, okay, then this one would be this so and so, and this one would be this such and such. I did some Google translations. Those are, of course, not canon. Just to sort of get the feel that I wanted in the narrative that I was writing. One of the things that I have delighted in doing in writing science fiction is to juxtapose bizarre cultural elements. You know, I mean, I have a planet settled by religious fundamentalists who use country and western for their sacred music and fight with katanas and play baseball.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's not to love? I have a nation full of good Prussian militarists who all have first names like Chin, okay, and who are overwhelmingly Chinese now, but that's okay. It's kind of like in The Apocalypse Troll, which actually was the first solo novel that Bain bought from me, although they then lost it for several years, like about 12, before they found it. I'd rewritten it 3 times because, let's see, so the Union collapsed, the Berlin Wall fell, you know, little things like that. But anyway, I always liked Anwar O'Donnell as one of my bizarre names. Yeah. Sure, he's a good Egyptian Irish boy, don't you know? But I think with the Andermani, I may have risen to a new high or sunk to a new low, as the case may be. But it's kind of a combination of the yellow peril and the German World War II militaristic, they're so terrible propaganda. All their enemies get like, there's no prejudice that they can't appeal to.
How much of the Andermani actually speak German versus Chinese?
Oh, Chinese, I mean, German is the national language. The Chinese that hangs on in the empire is much more just a matter of names and culture than anything else. The majority of Andermani, okay, it's been the national language for 300 years, and these people were kind of like, we really, really like you. You really, really did save our butts.
Given that during his lifetime, Gustav Andermann did assimilate 3 or 4 additional systems. To what extent was that Chinese population diluted within the empire over the intervening centuries, or was it a region that had a lot of it?
No, okay. New Potsdam is ethnically, by this point, still probably 90% ethnic Chinese, and the viceroys who are sent out and so forth are primarily from New Potsdam. Now, the conquered populations, if you will, are admitted to full participation in the imperial system after certain milestones are passed, like the rebellions stop. And you, yeah, but you basically, once they have qualified for the franchise, et cetera, they're allowed a lot of local autonomy, and then gradually they're admitted into the empire at the upper level. But don't forget that the Andermani Constitution conserves a hell of a lot of political power in the emperor. And the other organs are mainly there to advise him. And he is perfectly capable of saying, yes, I have taken your advice under consideration. It's kind of like Truman when he took the vote in the cabinet meeting and he said the vote is nays 10, ayes 1, the ayes have it. Okay, that's sort of Gustav's position there.
So far in the writing, the main Andermani point of view has been Robin Strange. Are we ever going to see a scene from the Emperor's point of view?
I don't know. Are you? It seems possible. It would, however, require me to begin that other series. Nobody wants me to start? Yeah, you start.
Question. They have just, Andermani has just found out that Mesa tried to assassinate him and killed a cousin of him.
Well, they did try to assassinate Gustav. They tried to assassinate Gustav's son, Crown Prince Juan.
So I would...
That's right. That's not going to be a good name in the Imperial German. Crown Prince Juan instead of Crown Prince Wilhelm. I just don't know that name.
Yeah, so I would presume in the near future we may see some more Andermani show up in the series.
You may. You may not, too. It depends on the main. If you've read Freedom, if you've read Freedom in the Shadows, then you know if the Andermani want to conquer Mesa, they better get their butts in gear. His bike's already on the way, and her name's John Deere. But they really pissed her off. Does she? You know, there's that whole quadrant self-defense force that's being occupied, being raised and trained while she's out doing her thing out of the merger of all of those quadrant militaries and so forth.
And what book are we going to hear about this?
I don't know. Are you going to hear about it in a book?
I like to hear it now. So having read really everything up to the last book in the mainline series, but not having encyclopedic knowledge that some people seem to have. Where did you explicate the background of the Andermani? Where did you?
The Andermani have been partially explicated in several books. You get the biggest dose of who they are in Honor Among Enemies, where Honor is operating in Silesia and has to worry about what the Andermani are doing.
Did you cover the history of the Empire at all there?
Bits and pieces, yeah. You have Here Comes Gustav. He thought he was Frederick the Great. You have the Emperor who was removed from office when he was, I think, talking to rose bushes. You have the female Gustav who had herself declared male and challenged her cousin. If any of my cousins want to make anything out of it, bring it on. It was kind of interesting all the way through all the way through his reign. He was His Imperial Majesty Gustav, and his consort was Her Imperial Majesty Qin. So it's kind of a little strange all around. But there will be I think, the next volume of the companion. We're going to do the Andermani and the People's Republic. And so you will get more history and more background on in one place as a reference, complete with uniforms, a short biography of Gustav Andermann, and I think you get a complete listing of the monarchs and so forth in there. It will be pulled together and much more of an encapsulated view.
Clearly, I have some rereading to do.
Well, I don't know about you, but I always hated rereading books I liked. I wasn't sure, but I had to do it from time to time. I'm sorry, I can't.
It was a 6 or 10 page footnote on the system.
Yeah, well, but what we're going to do is going to supersede 6. We'll probably incorporate quite a bit of it, since the same person who was contributing to that part is also contributing to what we are doing now. But at this point, I really couldn't tell you the degree to which it will carry over. To be brutally honest, my writing schedule has been a crater for the last several months, and I am so busy shoveling at the bottom of it that I haven't even looked at what House of Lies is going to look like when we get to it. Although I am planning at this time, and this is subject to change, but at this time, I am planning on doing the development. This one will be about the creation of the People's Republic of Haven out of the Republic of Haven. So it'll be kind of a earlier companion piece to Roger's response to the creation of the People's Republic. Okay. I saw him back there. We'll do this one and then we'll do that one. Okay.
I might have my chronology a little bit off, but it sounds an awful like a lot of these series will coincide somewhat in time period with the creation of the Andermani Empire.
It will coincide very, very closely, in fact. And they'll be happening quite some ways away. You have to remember that at this point, the Star Kingdom of Manticore is Denmark. Except that Denmark was a lot closer to Prussia. At the time that Travis Long, the protagonist of the Zahn books, enters the Navy, the Royal Manticoran Navy is in a state of severe build down. There are people who are questioning why they need a Navy at all. There's one guy who has come up with this plan to saw battle cruisers in half and turn them into big rescue corvettes to be used by the Coast Guard. And you have a situation where guys are like, whoa, we're really going into hyper? That's going to be so cool! Because they don't do it very often aboard the battle cruisers of the Royal Manticoran Navy. And Travis is enlisting in the Navy at a time when the Navy may be going to go anytime, sometime real soon now. And of course, since it's in my universe, and I have this thing about navies, we know that's not going to happen. But Travis doesn't. And so this is it's going to be fun because with the Stephanie Harrington books, I'm exploring Sphinx and the meeting with the tree cats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Travis Long books are very nearly contemporaneous with the Stephanie Harrington books. There may actually be a little cross-pollination at some point as we go along. And I am seriously considering yet a third group of YAs, a second group of YAs, a third group of books, which would be in that same time frame and might impinge. I haven't made up my mind one way or the other about them. Okay, got back here.
Is the entire line of Andermani as eccentric as the ones we've been specifically introduced to, or do they occasionally just make it normal?
Well, normal for the Andermani is not exactly normal for everybody. Well, okay, he actually, okay. Gustav and his descendants, by and large, have been so capable that no one cared a lot about their eccentricity, but it's also a bit of a family tradition now, okay? If you're not sufficiently eccentric, there's something wrong with you. And that doesn't mean that you have to be, like a Looney Tune. You can be Imelda Marcos and collect shoes, all right?
Okay, now we really need to know more about the Emperor.
Oh, I haven't really decided. Well, the main thing that's weird about him, it's not really weird, but the thing that is a problem with him is his, I won't call it paranoia, but he is he is a practitioner of realpolitik on a level that the Andermani Empire hasn't practiced in quite some time. And that's why he was so creatively neutral in Manticore's favor until it looked like it was time for him to extort a little something out of Manticore himself. And he built essentially the risk fleet. The theory was, I'm going to build a navy that's big enough that they won't dare have a war with me while they got Haven in their front parlor, and I will be a presence that they'll have to negotiate with to keep me off the scales against them. And it is a very fortunate thing for him that Haven attacked Manticore, because had he really become a sufficient threat, Queen Elizabeth, I'm going to use a phrase that was very common in German naval circles in about 1910 to 1913. Elizabeth would very cheerfully have Copenhagen the Andermani fleet, if that was, do you know what I'm talking about here? The British decision to destroy the Danish Navy in Copenhagen when they joined the armed neutrality of the North with Russia against Britain at the height of the, and they didn't bother to declare war. Okay, you declared war, you joined the other side, here we come. You know, and Elizabeth is one hell of a ruthless monarch. If you look at her, I mean, she's not a nasty person, okay, but she is about as cold-blooded as it comes when it is a matter of doing what she believes is her responsibility and her duty to the Star Kingdom, or now the Star Empire. And you might notice how Mike Hinckley reacted in Freedom from the Shadows, when she found out that somebody was setting up these resistance movements, thinking that they were being supported by Manticore. Her position was, well, I don't care whether we're really supporting them or not. They think we are, and we're not going to let them get hammered on my watch, blaming my Star Kingdom for it. No. And she didn't write home and say, Dear Beth, should I do this? Instead, she wrote home, Dear Beth, often they mesa ta. I mean, that's right. I really like Michelle Hinckley. I think that, you know, she was because of that whole thing about nepotism and everything else, she was being kind of holding herself back. And Honor more or less said, stop that, you know, and sent her off. But I mean, you know, it's like, one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing is her in her academy sweats and her purple fluffy tree cat slippers, or when Dicey the cat steals her donut. Yes. You know, she's like, you are so dead. So I like Mike. Although right this minute, in many respects, my favorite of all of the more recently introduced or developed Manticores is probably Terekhov. Terekhov is one ruthless bastard. And, you know, Honor would find a way that, no, we won't have to destroy the space stations with the personnel on them. And he's like, what the hell, we'll destroy the space stations if you push us. And, you know, you weren't bluffing, weren't you? Of course I wasn't. Oh my God. It's a good thing he's on the side of the angels. Yes, Brian.
Are you ever going to assign or have the tree cats assign a tree cat to Mike?
To who?
Mike Hinckley.
Oh, I didn't know, am I? There are going to be tree cats assigned to a lot of important, you know, she's actually kind of, sort of, almost got a tree cat available.
Well, that was
yeah, but she has one with 10th Fleet. Remember the Marine with his tree cat, who is now probably pretty much the permanent sentry outside her door when anybody might be coming. You know, no, where that will go, I don't know. It's going to depend on how many tree cats are available. There aren't a whole lot of them. Okay.
I think it is a tree cat in human form, in my opinion.
Beg your pardon?
But I think it is a tree cat in human form.
She is a tree.
You know, actually, well, yeah, in a lot of ways. I do remember where she was thinking, no, I refuse to grow up that much. But she is definitely of the, you know, kill them all, let God sort them out variety. But she's trying to be better. Well, that works fine at the tactical level. The strategic level, you got a few more drawbacks.
Speaking of dicey, reminds me of a question. What do the tree cats think of normal human cats?
Well, you have not yet seen Dicey Meets Nimitz. Dicey is no fool. We haven't done that scene yet, and I've established that Nimitz gets along fine with Honor's dad's golden retriever. Now you haven't met his golden retriever either, and that's because his golden retriever did not have prolong and does not live as long as street cat does, and so is no longer really a factor.
Kind of sticking with the theme of this particular thing, Szechuan Bratwurst, cats got a whole lot of developed food, and I'm having a lot of fun with that myself. And just wanted to know if you had any particular like things that you want to push with your cereal.
Let's have a Sino-Prussian cookbook.
That sounds good.
All right, listen, I went to high school with a guy whose father was Norwegian and his mother was Taiwanese. And he was a 6'2" blue-eyed Chinaman who was like beating off girls with sticks in high school. The rest of us were like, why is he doing that? But I thought I didn't like Chinese cooking. I thought I didn't like Oriental cooking because my parents had been feeding me chop suey. I defy anyone who has fed chop suey to like Oriental cooking. But one day, Nils invited me home for dinner. And I was like, okay, fine. And we got there, and I thought, oh my God, his mother's Chinese. This is going to be awful. I'll leave a little bit to be polite. And then they had 4 or 5 servings. She let me come over 3 more times before she took my fork away and said, we in my house, you use chopsticks. I never use chopsticks. It was really, the Pavlovian response thing. It was like, okay, fine, give them to me. And since then, I have not encountered a single style of Oriental cuisine that I don't like. Now, that doesn't mean I like all dishes in all cuisines. So it is certainly possible that you might find sort of Penang curry with bratwurst turning up somewhere around here.
General Tso's special.
No, it wouldn't be General Tso's special. It would be General.
Spetzel.
Oh, yes. Oh, but see, what I was going to say is Nils' family, Nils' dad was a diplomat, and he has both sides, his mother's family and his father's family, have people living in the United States. And up until the last time that I heard from him, they had a joint family reunion every year. And I'm thinking smoked salmon Szechuan. Okay? I tried to picture, because they would bring traditional dishes for both sides of the family to the reunion. And
Smoked salmon Szechuan sounds pretty darn good.
well, I have to say, I'm not that fond of most of the Norwegian cuisine that I've sampled. Okay, I don't have anything against it, but I'm not that fond of it. But I just juxtapose it against, it's like, okay, it's kind of like, Thai cooking. Any country that has over 300 different varieties of chili pepper, okay, you better be cautious about what you order off the menu. Although the worst experience I ever had, this was pretty bad. I was in California, and I was in a Chinese, Vietnamese, American, German restaurant. And what it was they had 4 kitchens, Okay, they had 4 different styles of cuisine that they offered in the restaurant. It wasn't exactly fusion cuisine. Unfortunately, I got guacamole with, served with my salad. The reason that was unfortunate was that I thought it was guacamole. I found out different. Now see, the problem was that they made their own wasabi and they made their own guacamole in the restaurant. So you didn't have the nice pureed, smooth. This was the lumpy wasabi, which I, in my foolishness, assumed had to be the restaurant cut and blended guacamole. I was disabused of that notion with the very first mouthful, and proceeded to eat rather more slowly after drinking quite a lot of iced water.
You're saying that the ice cream had turned.
Well, the only thing that was worse than that was we went to, how many of you guys have ever been to Moscow? In Moscow, Idaho, which is also in Pullman, Washington. The line runs through the middle of the town.
I haven't been to that, but I have been in Moscow.
Okay. We were at Moscow. We've been about 3 times. We were at Moscow and we went to a Chinese restaurant, some concept. And we did the, portions are big, so there were like 7 of us, and we ordered like 6 entrees, and everybody was going to share. And they had a Mongolian lamb dish, which was delicious, except that it had the high-octane chili pepper from hell. Little teeny tiny purple one. Now I go to a Thai restaurant, I say, oh, how hot do you want to make it? On a scale from 0 to 10, with 10 being Thai. Oh, 14 sounds good to me, kind of thing. Not with these peppers. We had people going through with their chopsticks and picking real tiny pieces of pepper out, one by one, because nobody was going to bite down on a mouthful that might have any of that thing in it. Okay? So I'm thinking about the possibility here that, I'm a science fiction writer. I have genetic engineering available. Hot damn, can I build a chili pepper? And this one is called Satan's Spittle. Okay? It will be.
Actually, there's a barbecue sauce that's already called that.
I wrote that.
I was just wondering, has Mike ever met Robin Strange?
You mean our friend the Admiral? Yeah. Oh yeah, they met. Yeah. And they.
It doesn't seem so compatible there.
Look, Jin Liu is he's less cheerfully homicidal than Mike.
So he's in control.
Yeah, well, people, one of the things, Mike is not a loose cannon, okay? Mike simply has that same ruthlessness that Elizabeth has. In a way, she is more ruthless than Honor, and in other ways, she is less ruthless than Honor, okay? Mike will actually hesitate to do what needs to be done. And then when she decides it needs to be done, be ruthless in carrying it out. Honor is likely to go enormously out of her way to find a way to avoid killing any more people than she needs to, but she is utterly ruthless about doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done. Okay, so Honor is strategically more ruthless than Mike is, but Mike is tactically more ruthless than she is. And that's one reason why Mike made such a good executive officer for Honor. Okay? I saw him over here. Yes?
Just for something. You mentioned anything on the portion said intelligence engineering was helping to aggressiveness.
Not always.
Not always, but it's shown up in the narrative line.
Yeah.
Is the ruthlessness that was in my share or flush of that in Washington game?
To some extent, but not for exactly the same reasons. You may never find out the reason for the Harrington genome being where it is. The Myerdal mods explain a lot of it, but not all of it. But I have built that hook in and buried it so deep that if I never decide to use that part of the plot line, you will. These are not the plot elements you're looking for. Have you guys seen the illustrated books, Darth Vader and Son, and Darth Vader's Little Princess? Yes. Okay, my favorite of them all of the Luke ones, is where Darth is sitting doing this, and Luke is rolling all over the floor, and Vader saying, "I have you now." But my favorite of the Vader's Little Princess is where, you know, it's okay, Dad, I can go the rest of the way to school from here. No, I'll drop you off at the door. And the last thing you see is Leia walking up the steps in an all-terrain ATV, clomping away. She's going, "This is so embarrassing."
So, see how the Andermani Empire was prior to the whole Szechuan Confederacy takeover?
Yeah.
Was this something that the Andermani really wanted to do, or did they feel they were forced into it, just like the humanities were because of the world itself? And how is that going to influence the Andermanis? And just how many planets in big are they? We usually give us a clue.
They're quite large now. Basically, the Andermani, I think, do you remember, Marcus, the number of planets they got? Was it like 35 or something they got?
Well, there's always one every
Yeah, and after, do you remember? Because I know they split them. Okay, we mapped the sectors that went to each, but we haven't actually done a breakdown. That will have to be done for this book because of the contention between Manticore and the Andermani over Silesia. Officially, the Andermani concern with Silesia is that the violence and the unrest is spilling over onto us, and it is a dangerous place for our merchant ships to operate, yet an important local market for us to reach. Officially. And probably 80–85% of Gustav's interest in the region really did come from there. Now, Gustav is not the only player in the decision to occupy Silesia, however. And as you saw in War of Honor, not all of the members of the aristocracy are fully on board with let's make nice with Manticore. That element is expansionist. And so is that other 15% of Gustav himself in his motivations. So there is clearly a bent towards imperialism involved. Now, Gustav really would have preferred to keep nibbling away at Silesia because that's the way they've always done it in the past. And they've had to make some decisions about how they're going to administer their portion of the Confederacy and so forth that will impinge upon their traditional methods of governance. But by and large, they'll apply lessons that they've learned before, and the Andermani and the Silesians will soon discover that it is better to start beginning to learn Mandarin than to become a nail that needs a hammer. The other factor here is, if you haven't looked at a map lately, the Andermani are about to find themselves squeezed between two lobes of the Star Empire of Manticore. Because over here you have the Talbot sector, and over here you have Manticore itself with Trevor Star and some of the the local stars that are directly affiliated in the old Star Kingdom. And the Andermani didn't survive as long as they did by not being suspicious of potential threats in the vicinity. So how that's going to play out, don't know. We'll find out. I saw a hand back here.
You just answered what I was going to ask. That somewhere down the line, the Kaiserville
Could happen.
Prep.
Could happen. It could also be.
Sometimes the minor details getting rid of Mesa.
Well, it could also be that at some point down the road, the Andermani are going to realize that in order to live long and prosper, they are going to have to become a formal member of the Grand Alliance in order to see to it that they will be equally represented in the security arrangements and so forth. The Andermani, by and large, are not in love with empire for the sake of empire. They don't feel any need to control everybody about them. So if they are in a position to be in a stable political, economic, and military relationship with the major military powers in the area, they are not going to feel the need to go out and pick fights. Okay? They're pragmatic in that respect. All right? I think you. Yeah.
Getting back to the tree cap and subject to this panel, will there be any tree cap visitors to the Andermani Empire?
Well, there's already been one. If you mean, will tree cats be traveling to the Andermani Empire on their own, unescorted and unpartnered by humans? The answer is probably no. Do you mean, will tree cats make themselves available to go and be bodyguards for Gustav and his family? The answer is almost certainly yes. There is, however, the problem of how are the Andermani nobles, et cetera, going to feel about having a telepath who's basically reporting to the emperor, running around in their neighborhood. I'm not saying that they are planning any coups or anything of the sort, because only a real dimwit would be seriously considering a coup against this guy. Let's put it this way, if you plan a coup against him, he darn well better succeed. There's no consolation prize against his stuff. You do not want a bodyguard?
What's the standard of living for a typical citizen of the Andermani Empire compared with, say, Haven?
Better than Haven, not as good as mandatory. Now, you gotta understand that by 21st century standards, even a duelist is pretty darn well off. I mean, among other things, he had prolong and stuff that we don't have, today. But it was like I said in at least one of the earlier panels, the base to which you compare yourself is the base of your own society. The Andermani, by and large, have a lot of what I think of as the Dutch mentality of small-scale entrepreneurship, working hard, partying hard. If you could think of a portly Dutch Chinaman kicking back with his beer stein and his meerschaum pipe, okay, you're getting into the sort of this is a tranquil day in an Andermani bourgeois household. Okay, is that, except that instead of kicking back, and listening to the fiddler on the green, he's kicking back in front of his holovid watching the soccer match, that's being played in the microgravity field, where you get some remarkable blocks and shots on goal. It's like you have extra wings, literally, on the team, that kind of thing.
Speaking of being surrounded, early in some of the star chart galaxy,
the existing star chart is a two-dimensional pen and ink based that I started when that was all that was available for mapping a three-dimensional environment. I have since transferred it to an electronic mapping system, but it's still 2D. View9 has spent some time working on converting that to astrosynthesis. The problem being that there are canon distances between the stars in the books that we have to preserve. And my understanding is that Evergreen fully intends to create a fully articulated, detailed, three-dimensional star map from the existing map. All right? Now, the problem we're going to have is that I, MD9, will have less personal control over whatever Evergreen comes up with. And they may be less concerned about maintaining the canon distances than I am.
I mean, the Asgard, Midgard, I can't remember them being very much involved.
Well, they haven't been very much involved.
Is that going to change?
You do have the promise that the Knock-On 2 was the latest Star Trek movie did, where you could go from Earth to the Klingon Empire homeworld in one day. I hope they did that in the movie. And they also teleported from Earth to the Klingon Empire instantaneously. I don't think Green Tree.
I think, you know, Warp 46 would get you there. From
The tree cats, colonization, I think they have now, say, move out to Allen Cluster or Louisiana.
I have an industrial or economic question about the Andermani Empire. So, my reading of books, I've been really kind of curious as to why it taken it so long for the Andermani fleet to come out and make it to the fore, because it seems like there's been either shipyard problems or technological problems to get their fleet fully up to the center. We've only had a few squadrons that are actually seen.
Well, there are more. There would be more of them available, except for the fact that when it turned into a war apparently against the Solarian League, the Andermani pulled back to be the neutral. Basically, the Andermani pulled back so they could be the hammer that came down on Mesa if it came to that, okay, and cross Solarian territory to do it without being, you know, etc. The reason for the original problems was that, unlike Haven, which had captured examples of Manticoran technology, and that little treaty with Erevan that led to that embarrassing exchange of information, the Andermani didn't have that. And so their MDMs and their, advanced long-range missile finding technology was a combination of homegrown and what they could duplicate from fragments that they had picked up about how the anti-weapons work. And they were not really very good. And so in refitting the Andermani ships to handle the current generation MDMs and to be equipped with Keyhole and Keyhole 2, it required a substantial period of refit. And they were coming out of that period of refit, excuse me, when Oyster Bay hit. And so they were, when the Havenites say, okay, we're all going to be friends now, we don't need the Andermani ships to stand off the Havenite fleet. And we do want them to be as unconnected with the Grand Alliance as possible in the eyes of the Solarians. So they've all gone home. That doesn't mean the tech teams that Manticore sent to the Andermani shipyards to help them bring themselves fully up to speed have been recalled, because they haven't been. Gustav is continuing to upgrade his hardware and so forth, even though he is no longer officially a member of the Grand Alliance, which says a lot about the extent to which the Grand Alliance currently trusts him. Okay?
You kind of already answered this with your last comment, but I just want to, is the information that